we go. Getting a few people on here. Hope everybody's having a really good Friday. I'm just having people come on in. I'm still having problems that, it shows that it's Pacific time, but I promise by next week we'll get it all sorted out. But that's why I sent it out on multiple platforms to say it was 5:15 today. So we'll just give a minute or so. You guys see in the news, within the last few days, how the Prime Minister of Japan has been talking about that they're going to make sure that the Olympics go. That's a good sign, especially with things turning around, kids going back to school next week or the following week, that things are headed in the right direction. So I think it looks pretty good. Now, just get you guys back in the water and get turned back up. All right. How's everybody doing? Coach Kathy, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Very well, very well. Can we get ready to do some exercise shoveling snow outside? I don't know what it's like there, but Hamilton has quite a bit of snow going.
We didn't get too much, so it's not bad.
It's about you.
Good. Well, I'm going to start in on my first couple notes here before I really get to kind of the topic of the day. And the first one was obviously that I got Tokyo a go-go, that, with the Prime Minister talking so positively and putting himself in that position, I would like to think that, things are so confident that they're going to run. They've even got an athlete playbook for all the countries to look at of what the requirements are, how they're going to be running it. And we're 167 days and counting. So that's exciting. A little bit of something to look forward to in these tough times. So the other thing I'll just throw out for you guys is that our president, myself, Pat, and I have yesterday had a nice talk with the Camp Robin Hood owner about next summer, and we're hoping to get some plans together already for us utilizing that facility again. It was just so wonderful this summer, and swimming outdoors is so healthy that I think it's going to be something really fantastic for us to take part in again. So that's again, we're kind of trying to think well in advance and get things planned, thinking the best of what's going to happen with this situation. So I really hope you guys have some more questions for me this week. It was pretty quiet last week, and I'd really invite you all, if you have any questions, no matter if you think that it may be irrelevant or you may think that it's maybe not appropriate or something like that, but basically I really would like to have people ask questions, and this is the time to do it. We have the time and opportunity to ask those questions for me to speak on those things. That's really what this Fire Away Friday was for, and specifically for parents, but also for athletes to kind of get a feel for how things are changing, where are we going, right? What's different, what's new, what can we expect? So one of the first things I'm going to talk about, and we are recording this so that we can post it, and people that aren't able to be here in the moment can look at it later and watch it at their convenience. But the thing I'm going to talk about today is swim meet entries, and not really understanding what maybe the previous regime had done or what's been commonplace within our organization in the past. Is it's, again, looking forward several steps, is trying to educate and inform people of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So with respect to that, with swim meet entries, it's a coach determined process with athlete input. And certainly as the athletes move from being younger to older, their input, that percentage changes. Part of the roles and responsibilities of the coaches are to select events that complement the athlete development. And that athlete development pathway is kind of sophisticated. It's not just that, you're good at swimming 100 breaststrokes, so we swim 100 breaststroke, 50 free, and 200 IM, and that's it. That the athlete pathway or development pathway is multifaceted. As we go through from being 10 and under to 11 and 12, 13, 14, the coaches will kind of plan their attack on how they're going to enter swim meets with athletes. And I'll give you a brief overview. Let's say if we take the first training cycle in a normal year from September to December. In September, we kind of get going, with a heavy emphasis on technique and getting back in the water and starts and turns and drills and progressive buildup of the training schedule. You wouldn't start your first week, especially for the older kids, you wouldn't start them at 8 workouts a week. You would make sure that you build in with a progressive overload. And then when you get to your first competition, typically what I would like to do is I like to pick events that are rarely swum. So maybe for freestylers and flyers, they would swim 100 breaststroke. And maybe for sprinters, they'd swim a 400 free, or again, depending on your age group, right? It may be that, Coach Carter puts all his athletes in 50 breaststroke and 100 IM. And there's a reason for us doing that. We start the year off, kids are just getting into shape, we're practicing skills, we're practicing technique, and we don't want to put them in their best event right away because we know that we're freshly into the season, we're learning techniques. They may be under training load, so they're actually pretty tired, and we don't want their first exposure to be, oh my goodness, I was 10 seconds off my time, and that sort of thing. So we would typically do our first swim meet, and we would swim really what I call off events. Okay, as we move through October to November, depending on what the competitive format looked like and what meets were offered that we wanted to take advantage of, we would then kind of try to get the complement of events, especially the younger kids in the 50, 100 of every event, and maybe 100 IM, 200 IM. And as they get a little more competent, then in the 200s, and then introduce the 400s, and at some time introduce the 800s. So in that first cycle up to October, November, you'd have a really big number of events, a lot of different exposures, purely from the developmental side, learning how to swim a 200 IM properly, learning how to swim a 200 backstroke, or maybe they swim a 50 fly for the first time. And then as we kind of see, as we get further into the season, competitions at a higher level have qualifying times. So naturally, your better events are going to get you qualified for those kind of competitions. Okay, so then when we get into that environment where you're at, maybe your more competitive meets, then you're swimming mostly your best events. So there's a real process that we try to go through, and it's important that we understand that it's not about spending money on an event, so we have to have this really high rate of return, that it's got to be their best event. That part of that entry process in events is about athlete development. And I would do this even with my university athletes that are swimming with us now. As an early season, we would swim multiple events, off strokes, different distances. I may even have some of my older athletes go 400 backstroke and that sort of thing. So that's a really important note to throw out to all parents and swimmers, is understanding that the event selection is really driven by the coach with athlete input. And certainly we encourage, if parents have questions and want to understand the process a little bit better, I think A, this is step one. B, we would do that in a coach-parent meeting. Remember in the old days when we used to have parent-coach meetings, and sit down and explain that process. You may swim that 200 freestyle 3 times before you get to Christmas. You may swim 50 breaststroke once. That's all part of that whole development curve. I think it's important that we understand the majority of our club that's 14 and under, we really need to have a broad spectrum of events. Everything I've said before, but number 2 is you really don't know some of the athletes' propensities until you actually put them in the competitive environment. You know, we've seen people really break through and 200 IM when we really didn't think their breaststroke was good enough, but they actually have a really good breaststroke IM, but they're not a good breaststroker. They have a good breaststroke leg in the IM, but they're not a good breaststroker. So we see these things all the time, and part of that process is being able to expose them to that. Maybe somebody was deathly afraid of the 800, and the first time they swim it, they crush it, and they just show all of a sudden they're really good at that. And so success breeds success, it builds confidence, and those kind of things have a way of trickling down. There's also a time where I would have my whole group entered in the 1500, and at times I would take them to go open water. Not saying they're open water swimmers, but it's a different exposure with different learning outcomes. It complements them as a pool swimmer. And so that's kind of why it needs to be a coach-directed initiative. So just to kind of be straight and honest and blunt is that, you know, parents don't select the events, right? We can explain to you why we're doing what we're doing and trying to, you know, understand that process, but it's really more coach-driven, athlete input and parent supported, okay? So as we go through the year, that kind of cycles through. So we break for Christmas, we get back in January. January would always be, we're swimming something longer, challenging, tough. We would find meets to go swim the 400 or 800 or 1500 because that's appropriate for that training phase. When you're trying to build aerobic capacity, heart, lung, circulatory system, build their fitness, build their confidence from doing things that are super challenging and difficult. I mean, I think I've told this story before, but I used to coach a girl in Hamilton that was deathly afraid of the 800. We were in London and we couldn't find her. And she was hiding in the change room so that she was purposely trying to miss her race. And she did miss her race, but her coach found an empty lane in one of the later heats and had her swim it. And wouldn't you know, she did great. This girl went on to represent Hamilton in the International Children's Games in Patras, Greece, San Francisco. She went on to move to Calgary. She went to Harvard University, was a meet record holder, varsity record holder there, and was a top 5 swimmer at nationals. So it was really that, you know, she'd probably be embarrassed when I tell that story, but it's the truth that, you know, she just had to overcome that fear, and she was a different young lady after that, right? So sometimes those most daunting, haunting, challenging things, once you overcome them, you actually feel so much better about yourself. And I'll throw another example. For those of you that have ever jumped off a 10-meter tower, before you actually do it, it's pretty terrifying. It's super high, your heart's in your throat, and you finally get that athlete to jump off the 10-meter tower, and within 10 seconds, they're running back up to try to go again because it was so much fun, and they feel so good about themselves. It's kind of like that. First time you do a really good 200 breaststroke is super challenging, but it builds confidence once you get those things under your belt. So that spectrum of events is about expanding capabilities and being able to go from a top-down process. Like, it's much easier to swim the 50 breast once you learn how to swim a really good 200 breaststroke. Not so much the other way. 50 breaststrokers swimming up to 200 breast is a little daunting, and it hurts. It is incredibly challenging. But when you train from a top-down approach, it's way better, way better. So we've seen many times, like Ryan Cochran, who was 1500 freestyle Olympic double medalist for Canada, if you don't know, he would swim on the 4x200 free relays. And he wasn't the fastest out in the first 100, but he closed like crazy. And I think Coach Carter and I were looking at the Canadian records, and he went 3:43 for 400 freestyle. But he came from the 1500 down. So even with kids that are natural born sprinters, which, by the way, is about 10% of the whole population, but real natural born sprinters, it's still in their best interest to build capacity to be able to swim a competent 400, 800 free. They may not do it very often, but to build that aerobic capacity, that muscle memory, that muscle endurance is not only important, it's really our responsibility as age group coaches to develop that kind of cellular level, that kind of muscle memory, that kind of heart-lung circulatory system, the mindset, the attitude, and the toughness from swimming those events. So as they go on to university, then they're set. Everything will be easier. Even though there'll be challenging workouts, they'll change their strength training regimes. Lots can change as they go to university, but they've got that background. University of Western coach, Paul Midgley, loves getting our athletes because they're organized, they're disciplined, they're tough as nails, and they can do multiple events, okay? So when you think of another level of going to a U.S. college, the more events you can score points in for your college, the more valuable you are and the more likely they're going to offer you something in terms of scholarships. So that's kind of a residual benefit of what I'm talking about. A couple examples of well-roundedness and top-down approach. Those of you that know Mark Spitz or know of Mark Spitz, who is kind of the benchmark with 7 Olympic gold medals and all in world record time. His first national qualifying time was in the 1650, and his first international medal was in the mile, even though he won events in the 3 relays, 100 free, 200 free, 100 fly, 200 fly, right? So again, just showing historically, this has always been the case. If you look at Michael Phelps, Bob Bowman talks all the time about watching this 11-year-old do a set of 12 400s and going 1 free, 1 IM, and then 4 100s free, 1 free, 1 IM, 4 100s free, and it kept getting faster and faster. And you can't swim a good 400 IM 200 fly without being a really well-rounded, very fit athlete. So did you know that Michael Phelps and his coach, once a year, not shaved and tapered, they had to post, or he had to post, Phelps had to post a world ranking top 25 in the world 1500 in season in work. That means no rest and recovery, no shave and taper, no super suit. And that was a way that they were confident that he was fit enough, A, to be able to do 400 IM, 200 fly, but also if you look at his Olympic program from 2008, I think he swam 17 times or something like that. And many of his events, he had 17, maybe 12 to 22 minutes between the events. So if you're not cardiovascularly fit, you don't have that recovery rate. You don't have the capacity to do that. So that's kind of our responsibility as Markham Aquatic Club and all the coaching staff, is to develop all-around competencies, build confidence, make sure that they're learning all the strokes and all the distances, as well as this whole idea of a proper stage that we're setting for when they're at their physical, mental, and emotional maturity, which should be somewhere around university or beyond. Okay, so that's a little bit of my talk today about in the future, when we're going to be competing, this will be the process. Coaches will have a discussion with the athletes. We will go through the entry process. We will update and inform families of what we're doing. So you know what days to come to the meet and what events the child's swimming. But again, very important that we work together as coaching staff and families, that it's not about the child's best event. At certain times it is, when they go to a championship meet, for sure. But we also, the other thing I didn't really touch on here that's just popping into my head is that there are what's known as complementary events. So who's our country's best female backstroker? Kylie Mass. Did you know that she went 4:03 in season, unrested, short course meters 400 freestyle at University of Toronto? She's also been 2:05 long course 200 back. Right? She's got some fitness and some go, right? And that 400 free really complements 200 back. You see that a lot of good 400 freestyle, 200 back. Okay, Brittany McLean was a really good example, like a 210 long course 200 backstroker, and became an Olympic bronze medalist in the 4x200 free. But she was 5th, I believe, in the 400 or 800 free. I have to go back and check. But she was a finalist in the 4 and 8. But her specialty, she's a Canadian record holder in the 400, 800, 1500 free. Isn't that interesting, right? So I see we have a couple questions. or one question. Can you explain your view about winning at all benefit? I read it on your blog. Yeah, great question. So winning at all benefit is about, I used to say, always say that win is not a four-letter word. Someone asked me the other day, well, what's a four-letter word? Four-letter words are bad words that we tend to stay away from and that we don't want to use. So win is not a four-letter word. It's something we should be excited about and be trying to do at all benefit. Contrary to win at all cost. Win at all cost means by any means necessary, break the rules, take drugs, all that kind of stuff, which is nothing like what we're about. Win at all benefit means that winning is inherently good, and the process of going after that is really fun and exciting and good for you, right? That we should rejoice in that process. And that when you focus too much on winning, that becomes more about elitism than the pursuit of excellence. The pursuit of excellence has nothing to do with where you are in the world or the country or the club. The pursuit of excellence is the process that leads you down the path to being a successful person, whether that be in work or school or swimming, right? Elitism means it's only about the best and no one else matters. So winning at all benefit is all about the person who's at a regional C level, never misses practice, listens to the coach, works hard, right? Fights for what they really want, dedicates themselves, right? Time management, all those sort of things, and gets to a B level, right? The process led to a result that was success. Totally different than elitism. So that win at all benefit is something that I believe is something that every athlete can take away from our program, right? Whether it be school, that they're trying to move from the high 80s to the low 90s, okay, or anything like that. Does that answer the question? Okay. Any other questions on Fire Away Friday? Come on, challenge me. I dare you. Amber Chen, Anderson Lee, Mr. Stropel. This will be a really short meeting if you guys don't ask questions. What would you say are the three most important aspects in the culture of a successful club? Well, one is, I think, a team first mentality, right? Where that win it all benefit kind of kicks in, right? That together we're much better as a unit than we are one individual, right? I think that that whole process, that whole excellence oriented process can really be something that, you know, we believe every athlete leaves the program with. So I'm not kind of putting my words together the way I want to, but how I view a successful program will be that any athlete that comes out of the Markham Aquatic Club and on to life, whether it be early, whether it be at university, that they can walk away from the program that they've learned things such as the old-fashioned values we've been talking about, right? Commitment, time management, dedication, hard work ethic, you know, stick-to-itiveness, all those sort of things, goal setting, teamwork. Okay, so I think that's one of them. I think the other one with the culture of a successful club is that it takes on a life of itself. One of the things I'm really proud of with my athletes and in my previous club was that sometimes I would purposely come late to warm up at swim meets, and I would see that, you know, swimmer A, B, and C had already got everybody off the bleachers and were gone and activating. They didn't wait for me. They knew exactly what to do, and it didn't matter if they were 12 years old or 22 years old. They knew what the right process was, right? And I would do that once or twice a year on purpose, and I'd stand up in the stands with one of the parents having a coffee and just watch them. And it made me really proud because you were functioning like a real military unit. You were professional. They were organized. They knew what to do. They were watching the timeline. So I think that's the second thing about the culture of a successful club. And the third one is, and this is really important to me, is that we're tough in all the events. We show up in the 400s, 800s, 1500s while still winning medals in the 50s and the 100s. We're a full service program, even though the meat of the program content is middle distance free IM in terms of, again, age group development. So these athletes are really given every opportunity they can to maximize their swimming post university or even post grade 12, right? So if you look at all winning programs at the national or even the provincial level, you'll see multiple 4x200 free relays. It will be a reflection that they've got multiple people that can swim in that middle distance. And even if they're a breaststroker, right? Like Jade Lowe may be showing some prominence in breaststroke and IM, but she's got a beautiful freestyle, and she's done some distance sets in the other lanes where we've been blown away. She will have a great long course 200 freestyle. And if I don't enter in that, I might never see that development, right? So I think that's the other thing, the culture of Markham Aquatic Club, and we come onto deck as the MAC Army, is that we will be a force to be reckoned with in any event, anywhere, anytime, and especially in relays. That will show. Next question, can you address your point of view on only blacks racing suits? It's a question that often comes up. So it's along the lines of, it's a professional approach that everybody looks the same, right? It's a small thing we can do, similar to private schools, where you show up to practice, you show up to school, you show up to work in a professional manner, right? It's always been the case with all the clubs that I've been with, that we do that. We keep it black and keep it simple because people can get black suits pretty much anywhere, Walmart, online. And so that kind of stays consistent. And then you see everybody in the same team caps. And if you walk on a deck and you see a team that has multi-suit colors and they're wearing a smiley face cap, and and then you walk in and you see a team that's all dressed together, right, professional looking. It's about culture, and it's also about branding, right? So everybody at TPASC knows who we are because everybody wears a Markham cap and they're wearing black suits, and we are the professional team there. I don't care what anybody else says. That's what it is. So it's a bit about pride. It's a bit about culture. It's a bit about branding and professionalism. What's the most difficult time for you? How did you go through it? Personally? Are you talking about personally or professionally? I'm going to wait for the response for that because they're two pretty different things. Next question was, how are relays selected? So here's the general rule of thumb. Oh, as a coach, okay. So as a general rule of thumb, we pick the fastest four based off of current results on those relays. That's subject to change on a number of things. One, we might find that the week before that a few athletes have really taken off and a few other athletes maybe are dragging, and that we just feel it's best for the team to make that change. That's a subjective call for sure, but that's kind of our job to make those calls. The other thing is, it can be on the day. We were at Junior Pan Pacs in Hawaii, and Tessa Chapuluha, we were discussing her along with other people about who we were going to put on the relays, because everybody was swimming so well that there were more than 4 people that could go on those relays. So there's a bit of subjective discretion. We do look at, if that morning was the 50 free, we take the 4 fastest from that 50 free, unless there's something really unique that's going on. So it can change even at the meet. We can even change that from heats to finals, which is often the case. So the question about the most difficult time for me as a coach, and how did I get through it? I think at the time it was probably Nanaimo, because my best swimmer was not the best example, and I'll leave it at that. However, his mom was the president of the club and also the president of the Vancouver Island Swim Association and a board member on Swim BC, and they had made the mistake of making swimming was the most important thing in their son's life, even above school. And this person was getting into trouble and not showing any wasn't coming to morning practices. He was not doing very well, and it was we all knew kind of the trouble he was getting into. So I pulled the person in with his parents and I said, I'm not taking you to nationals. And this is a top 5 national swimmer. And I said, it's just a bad example. And that most of all, you haven't earned the right to go because you haven't prepared. And we're all about preparation for performance, right? If it was elitism, no problem. We'll just take him because he's good. But we're not about elitism. We're about the process of excellence. So I stood my ground and didn't let him go to nationals. And unfortunately, about 6 weeks later, that person met me outside and said that the board will not be renewing my contract. So I stood on principle and did what I was right for did what I thought was right for what was right for the team and for just general principles. And it cost me my job. It cost me my house. I had to move from Vancouver Island to a different place. And, you know, I'm kind of proud of myself for doing it because I didn't sell out and I didn't take the easy way out, but it had consequences. But, you know, I'm a big believer that everything has a way of working itself out. And if I hadn't have gone through that process, I wouldn't have come to Hamilton. I wouldn't have met my wife and I wouldn't have my family. Right. So in the end, I won. And that club's never recovered and it's never even been close to anything it was in the past. They haven't had a national finalist since 1999 and they may not ever recover from that. So that was definitely my most challenging time. And I worked through it because losers would give up and winners go forward. What is your best guess as to when the kids might come back, get back in the pool? We're just into, 7 minutes to go here. So my best guess is that we're going to hear something in the next week or so. And the way that I think is that if school's going back in, things are going to start to open up. And I know that Pat and myself have been in touch with MPAC. So the moment that we know it's a green light, we will be getting ourselves together, and the coaches and I will meet and we'll have a plan of attack and then let the membership know. When we go back, how long before we can do a time trial or small competition so we can get some updated times for our records. That's completely up to Swim Ontario. They will decide what phase we're in the return to racing. And yeah, we'll just have to follow Swim Ontario's lead with that. I've been informed it's a minimum 45 days between the return to training and return to racing. There we go. 6 minutes and counting. Keep your questions coming. I hope that's been helpful and that's given you some insight with what we're talking about. Any other questions? How about the swimmers out there? I'd love to hear from anyone that's like 12 and under. Does black suits include racing suits? Okay, that's a good question. The answer is yes, with the caveat that we may get a situation with Arena, who's our sponsor currently, that we may get a really cool black and blue style racing suit that we may, if we can do that with our sponsor and be able to provide that for our athletes, then we may shift to that. But as usual, there'll be a process. So, you know, if you just bought a $500 suit, we'll give you a timeline to use that suit up and, you know, you haven't wasted your money. We'll be pretty fair with that. But again, generally, we want to have that presence and that that whole visual impact and our image and our brand when we walk on deck, that we look the same. It's just not professional when one has an orange flowery suit and one has a Funkita suit and all that stuff. So trust me, we'll look awesome. We're going to be so good. It's going to be the Mac Army. What was your proudest moment as a coach? There's a lot there. Well, one was there was a very average swimmer in Regina, Saskatchewan, and she just wasn't very skilled to go from wall to wall as a swimmer. As a lovely human being. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I'll try to get this in. Wonderful person. And 3 or 4 years after I'd left Regina, I got something in the mail from her with a newspaper clipping. and she had become the first female firefighter in Saskatchewan. It's either Saskatchewan or Saskatoon, but she was the first female firefighter. And in this article, she had quoted myself and swimming, that swimming gave her the toughness and the mental determination to overcome things like stereotypes, sexism, being able to actually do the work of a firefighter. And that made me tremendously proud that she that the program helped her. And number two, that she sent me this 4 or 5 years later, that she mailed it to me. So that was super, super cool. I'm really proud of all the athletes that have graduated and gone on to university. I told you before that I keep a file of all the athletes and where they've gone, and that I think is something I'm really proud of. I'm really proud that I'm now the how do you put it? I've coached the most females under 450 or 450 long course and 440 short course than anyone else in the country. I think that, to me, it makes me proud, because you got to have endurance, you got to have speed, you got to be good at all 4 strokes. So it kind of shows the everything that I've been talking about. That makes me proud. Makes me proud that we won our first nationals, and every single swimmer that went to that competition scored points. That's really unusual, right? And to do it from that pool in those circumstances against the big centers and the big universities, and being able to beat those guys was a lot of fun. Who's going to win the Super Bowl? Oh, I got to go with Tom Brady. I cannot go against Tom Brady. I would really like to see that. And then I hope he retires, right? Like, go out as a winner and, just have everybody's jaw drop and go. But they're in for tough competition. I think it's going to be close. I hope. Any other questions? Going once. Going twice. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear from you if you liked it. If there's anything you thought maybe I could do for next time, tell me that. Okay? Have a good night. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye.